Roll call.
Jizzle. Neal.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Luce.
Here.
Zittergruen.
Here.
Hadley. Johnson.
Here.
Is there anybody who wishes to make a comment for something other than what's on the agenda? Hearing, seeing none. Consent agenda. Travis,
Item A,
Nope.
minutes of the,
wait a minute.
I think, should he read it first and then I'll ask for him to be pulled? What do you think, Mayor?
He would like an item pulled. Is that done after you've read it?
yep, I'll read
Okay.
it, then pull them off, because actually there's,
Okay,
I'll make
thank
a
you.
recommendation too.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yep. Item A, minutes of the October 17th, 2022 regular meeting and October 24th, 2022 work session. Change order number 1 for the 2022 alley improvement project. Consider final pay app for the 2022 alley improvement project. Resolution accepting the 2022 alley improvement project as complete. Consider change order number 1 for Decorah 2022 street improvements asphalt resurfacing project. Consider pay application number 3 for Decorah 2022 street improvements asphalt resurfacing project. Consider resolution approving grant to Sunflower Child Development Center for building permit fees. Item H, renewal of Class C liquor license with outdoor service for the landing market. Item I, tax abatement, Driftless River Properties LLC, 110 Lloyd Street, new construction. Item J, tax abatement, Stephen Jane Hildebrand, 207 Ohio Street, number 4, rehab. Item K, tax abatement, Travis Mossman, 401 Highland Drive, new construction. Item L, tax abatement, Travis Mossman, 403 Highland Drive, new construction. The last two items, K and L, staff would recommend pulling those off and taking no action on those two. They're not far enough along complete to be considered for application.
Are we paying the claims this
Oh, excuse me.
item B?
And item B should be claims. Everything else that I listed is in there. Claims should also be in there. Excuse me, but the Travis Mossman 401 Highland Drive and 403 Highland Drive, those two recommend pulling off and approving without those two.
Thank you. And Mayor, I'd like to pull off G as well for discussion. Thank you.
Okay. And that will come right after we get done with the vote on the agenda, is that correct? I mean consent agenda. Okay,
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda without those 3 items pulled off there.
I'll second.
motion made by Olson, seconded by Neal. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Olson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Chisel, Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley, Johnson.
Aye.
Okay, so then we will go back to H. Consider resolution approving grant to Sunflower Child Development Center for building permit fees. Want to give some background on that, Travis?
Yes, so it's been quite some time, but the council did receive an initial request from Sunflower Child Development Center to waive the building permit fees. At the time we explained it's not something that can be waived. These are built into code, and we don't have a means in code to waive fees. However, a workaround, for lack of a better term, is if the council wanted to consider a grant in the amount equal to the building permit fees, and that is what this resolution is drafted to reflect.
So if it's a grant, then the city, is that additional funds that would be going from the city to them?
They have already paid that amount of $15,349.80. They have already made that payment. The request again to the city is that that payment be returned to them in the form of a grant.
Okay, and so I have a question about it. Is that money that we would, we're not technically losing budget money because this would be extra money, right? But my question is, then do we have a grant process for other entities that want to do this? And do we have criteria by which we're going to allow other people to do this type of thing?
We don't. This would be similar to every time the council, like especially during work session, or excuse me, budget session, talks about the different nonprofits that funding will be provided to. We draft a 2080, or we do also have one singular resolution that one's more in-kind work that the city staff provides. So council has to set which specific either program or which specific entity and program that they want to incentivize. So each individual time a grant like this were to be done, it would have to be subject to council approval.
But the total amount is $15,349.80. So in essence, we would be giving them another $15,349.80 in addition to what we have, the council has previously designated for the project. Is that correct?
In addition to the grant previously designated,
Okay.
yes.
And where would this come from?
Their building permit fees that
No.
they have submitted.
No, I mean, from the city, if we're giving it to them.
It would come out of our revenues. Right, we've already collected
Right.
it, so
What-
we're
can
just
you
giving it back.
Can you remind me, so we gave them 400,000, no, 500,000 for the next, how many years? 5
Was it
years?
that long? I was asking, was it that long?
Okay, and then, did we give them any money in our,
They're not in the end of year.
no, we didn't give them any money in the end of the year?
No.
I'd like to move the resolution.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Zittigren, seconded by Johnson.
And Mayor, I just want to give context for why I pulled it off. I had some reasonable questions from the community, just kind of asking, is this setting a precedent, or is this a precedent that we want to set? And I thought the questions were reasonable enough that this item deserved council discussion. I guess I appreciate the initiative here, Travis, in putting this before us. I think that you've heard loud and clear from the council that supporting additional childcare capacity in the city is one of our just top priorities. And obviously, I don't think it would be reasonable for any prospective nonprofit, even with a good mission, to expect that we're going to be able to do this in every case, because we frankly have expenses related to our inspections and building permits and having a building code, and we need to make sure that we're not just always giving grants away. But this, I think, is, for me, it's an important enough need in our community that it's worth, I guess, this extra incentive to reduce or eliminate the burden of our building fees. So I'm glad we're doing this. I think it's, like the number one need that Decorah is facing right now. And I want to encourage it, especially given that they were surprised by some much higher than expected construction costs.
Okay, any further?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do want to, and I want to be clear, I don't know that I'm against it, but I want to hash this out. I think it's important to talk about, because I think we have to ask the question, so if Montessori, if Nissi, they want to do major renovations, move, right? Obviously, childcare is our priority. So I do think we are setting a precedent, and I think we have to be okay with that. Because I think that if we decide that we're going to pick and choose which nonprofit we do this for, especially if they're all childcare, that's not a good precedence to set. In the same way, we have housing as a precedence, right? So are we going to waive building fees for that? So when I think about council priorities, I think it's really important to ask ourselves, what is our limit? Which is why I asked about are there criteria? Are there can we, instead of giving the entire fee, can we give half the fee, right? To me, I think we might be running into a slippery slope if we just decide if something's really worth doing, we're going to waive the building fee, because then it's arbitrary. If we think this is a good project, we're going to do it. If we don't think it's a good project, we're not going to do it. Which means that I feel like either if you're a child care center, you're automatically going to get your fees waived. If we want to write that into our ordinance, great. But otherwise, I think we have other priorities that may say, including housing. Well, why should I have to pay a building fee? Housing's your priority. I'm building these new houses.
Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Zittergrun,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
Nobody wanted to discuss. It's very hard. Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Chisel.
I would go for the split, but.
I would have gone for the split too. That's why I was hoping someone would discuss with me.
Aye.
So I do hope that council, if any childcare comes up, isn't going to pick and choose, because we did just set precedents.
I think that's a very fair consideration.
Yep.
Okay, conduct public hearing regarding Vesterheim Boulevard easement lease. Before I open, do you want to just give brief description of where this is at and?
Sure. So we'll I'll tie the background between this and 6 together. So public hearing has to be required before the city can enter into any kind of lease or easement agreement for city-owned property. And Vesterheim is requesting to install a sign in the new, already previously discussed and approved new mid-block bump out on Water Street, which is currently has the concrete barriers to protect the work site in it. The city would have to approve a lease to Vesterheim to allow the sign installed in that bump out, but the code compliance officer, to be clear, still has to issue a permit for the sign itself. So want to be clear on that. Term of this lease is 30 years or upon termination, and the lease will be reviewed if Vesterheim were to pull a new permit because they were changing the sign to the point that they needed to do so. So council would then review and could either terminate or continue the lease agreement.
Okay, that being said, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this matter? Sure.
My name is Chris Johnson, and I'm the president and CEO of Vesterheim, and I'm just here tonight to voice my support for this. It's a part of our project, Vesterheim Commons, that will provide kind of a visible sign to talk about the new building that we have, but also orientation to the site as a whole. So I just request your support. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution accepting Vesterheim Boulevard easement lease.
Do we have any renderings of what this is going to look like?
Yes.
We did have, I'm not sure it was in this one.
Is it? Okay, I missed it then. I'm sorry.
Let's see here, 6B. Nope, excuse me, 6D is the rendering.
6C.
D is the rendering, that's the pretty picture. 6C are the specifications on it.
Oh, I've got it.
And I mean, it looks like there's more than the 4 feet that ADA requires on the far side of the benches and the sign. There's no concerns from streets that you've heard of, Travis, in terms of blocking the passage.
Correct, nothing for that, nothing for site obstruction.
Luce would move acceptance of the easement.
Second.
Moved by Luz, seconded by Olson. Further discussion?
I don't think we're setting a precedent for every nonprofit that asks us to put a sign on the sidewalk.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergrun,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal.
Motion carried. Public hearing regarding an alley easement for 601 West Water Street. Do you want to just give a brief background on that before I open the public hearing?
Yep, so again, I'll tie this with the background on the item 8. Excuse me. So the initial request of the city was to provide an easement in conjunction with a garage improvement project. There was an addition looking to be made. When the applicant went to Board of Adjustment to seek a variance because of their setback to the alley, they disclosed that they had a survey done and they're actually encroaching on the easement. So, or excuse me, encroaching on the alley. So an easement would be required regardless with the existing structure, let alone should the structure be improved upon. The initial thought of staff was to, we don't want to provide an encroachment into the alley. Alleys aren't exactly very wide to begin with, but yes, this has been an existing obstruction, and they're not looking to make the obstruction any worse. The question came in from on the staff side is, all right, if we grant an easement now and it carries into perpetuity, if the building is for some reason demolished or destroyed, then they can go ahead and build it right back. And so the happy medium between the applicant and what city staff was wanting to put forward is an easement agreement that will allow for the applicant to make improvements through December 31st, 2023. The easement will continue to exist until the building ceases to exist. And improvements can only be made up until December 31st, 2023. So yes, they can make the improvements and continue to exist in the alley, but again, should it be demolished or should it be destroyed through fire or some means, the easement no longer exists.
Okay, so with that, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Please come forward.
Sure, thank you. I'm the applicant. My name's Mark Branham.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to show you, this is a picture of the garage as it is currently. And so the alley is a 20-foot alley, but it's pretty wide there. We just want to go up. So the plan for when we're done, this is a 3D rendering. We're just making like an attic type space above for storage. So we're not going out at all. The plan is not, how much space it takes on the ground is not changing at all. We're not going into the alley any further. So like I said, much to our chagrin, we had it surveyed because the pins were missing. And it was built in 1926. And it's 4 inches over into the alley on one side and 6 inches on the other. We're not changing the footprint. We just want to go up and add attic type storage. So that's the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at this public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution accepting an alley easement for 601 West Water Street.
Luce would move we accept an easement on that.
Neil, second.
Motion made by Luz, seconded by Neil. Any further discussion?
I believe you said at the last meeting, Travis, or maybe it was Jeremy, that it doesn't pose an issue for the snowplow to get down that alleyway at all?
Not yet. Yeah, the plow itself doesn't.
Right.
If we get a, knock on wood,
Right.
pretty severe snow events this winter, any alley, I mean, they get
Right,
restricted
could be a
there.
problem.
But no, we use a pickup plow, so it makes it through.
Okay.
Just a question, say it's 20, 25 years from now, and they go to pull a building permit to do some remodeling or whatever. Do we have a mechanism as a city for tracking that this easement sits on it? Like, I'm just curious how that would work.
Yep, so if they were to pull a building permit, one, it's across the setback, so that's gonna trigger, do you need a variance or do you have an easement? And, well, especially once it's identified it's past the property line, do you have an easement in place? And then the easement is recorded and ties to the property, and that easement, when it's recorded, will state again with this agreement that December 31st, 2023.
Any further discussion? Hearing is-
I just had a
Sorry.
question. What's the thought behind the year build? Just so they don't keep doing more, or
Correct, so that it's, excuse me, so that just puts an end date so that it's not left outlying. Great example is our compliance permits before building permits were required. That's what they were called. Didn't have an end date. So we have a handful of projects that are still operating under compliance permits because they don't have end dates on them.
Okay, roll call.
Luce,
Aye?
Neal,
I
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Conduct a public hearing regarding a lease at 108 Railroad Avenue, and that's the street department. Can you give just a little background before I open that public hearing, please?
Yep, so this ties with item 10, the lease agreement. Excuse me. Lease agreement is for the solar array on the roof of the street department there, pursuant to the power purchase agreement that staff was directed to pursue by council. Since it's a private installation of the solar arrays, a lease must be held for them, and it's on city-owned property, so of course we need to hold a public hearing before the city council can approve. The term for this lease is 30 years or 6 months after expiration or termination of the PPA, whichever comes first. Because if you remember, the PPA does have the ability to potentially buy out as well. Rents receivable to the city are $25 a year.
I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing.
Luce would move acceptance of the easement on the property,
Neil would second.
108 Railroad Avenue.
Motion made by Luce, second by Neal. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, roll call.
Luce,
Aye?
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Olson.
Aye.
Conduct a public hearing regarding a lease in the vicinity of Pulpit Rock Campground. Travis, do you want to give a brief?
Yep. So again, this pairs with item 12 for action. Same thing. It's a solar lease agreement for the installation, private installation of the solar arrays on city-owned property. Thank you. Same terms exist, 30 years or 6 months after expiration or termination of the PPA. And again, rents receivable, $25 a year.
How much land is that?
Andy, do you remember how many acres that site was? That triangle there?
The array is like,
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it's DOT right away, and I know that was a struggle. That John Nielsen with Perry Novak Electric faced. He had to get agreement from the DOT to allow for the installation on a portion of it because it is shared right away. So about an acre for the array itself.
Well, the only reason I ask that then is an acre, if you're renting, you're getting about 175 a year. Seems like we're cutting a pretty good deal here.
It's our energy. They're putting it there for our energy use.
Well, it's what farmers rent it out too for people to put in for their use.
Not that place.
No, I
Okay.
mean the city's electricity is actually.
No, I know, but I mean,
Oh.
the farmers aren't paying for it, somebody else is.
Okay,
They're still getting $175 an acre. So it seems like we're shortchanging ourselves here.
currently we still have the public hearing, we're in the public hearing. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this item? I'll close the public hearing. Now I'll open it up for discussion. Now that I cut you off, did that?
No, that's that, and not having an escalating rent, cost of living rent, you know.
I'd like to check with John on this, or maybe Travis. I guess when I read the $25, I didn't think that we were trying to capture the real market value of the real estate on the street department roof or this triangle of grass that's just been grass forever, but simply ensuring that there was a token remuneration for contractual reasons. I mean, is that why there's a $25 number there?
There has to be some type of consideration for that to be enforceable. I mean, what Randy's saying is what I guess I always say. If the city leases land, it does have to be for fair market value. And I see two ways to look at this. Yeah, you could charge $175 a year per acre, but this is kind of unique because I would imagine that would be baked into then what the city pays for energy. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I could see it from both sides, but again, it's kind of a unique lease arrangement. So the question, are we receiving fair market value? Consideration can be more than cash. It's what the city is receiving in return.
Well, it's essentially wasted ground as well, too. I mean, it really isn't something to be used for much of anything else.
Underutilized anyway.
Yeah, right.
And not only that, we asked them to put it there so that
Yeah.
we could get our electricity from them. I mean, this seems like a strange conversation when you approach a company and say, we can't put our own solar panels up, but can you please be the purchase power agreement so that we can essentially get our electricity from you?
I agree. I'm looking for,
Make a motion to approve the
A second.
resolution accepting a lease in the vicinity of Pulpit Rock Campground.
Luce
I'll
would second.
I think, motion made by Olson. I think it was seconded by Neal first. Any further discussion?
Just to say thanks to staff, and I'm also excited, that we partnered with Novak Electric on this. This has been something we've been kicking the can down the road on forever, and it's great that it's happening. I know that with the recent passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, maybe this would have been easier, but we did the best we could given the laws on the books at the time we did this, and I just wanted to commend to staff that if we're pursuing future solar installations, I just want to make sure that they look into all the options since the laws have changed.
Right.
Okay. Roll call?
Olson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Jizzle, Luce,
Aye.
Zittergrund.
Aye.
Motion carried. Conduct public hearing on proposed amended and restated plan for the 2014 Decorah Housing Urban Revitalization Area. Travis, you want to give just a brief summary of that, please?
Yeah, so this item, again, it'll pair with action item 14 and actually come into play later as well on ordinance reading for item 18. So the city's current 2014 housing urban revitalization area has a tax abatement plan, tax abatement in it for residential properties of 100% for 5 years. And this is actually contrary to Iowa State Code, which I've printed out a copy in front of all the council members as well, 404.3A, which does state residential development area. The exemption can only be on the first 75,000 of actual value added by the improvements for a period of 5 years. I know Councilmember Luce also participated in a work session at the Iowa League of Cities that pointed out that the 5 years, 100% on full value added is actually not in conformance with state law.
Thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution adopting amendment to the plan for the 2014 Decorah Housing Urban Revitalization Area.
Luce would move such.
Second?
Speaking to the point
Luce,
at the
just a
Iowa
minute.
League of Cities that it'd be nice to be on the correct side of the law, being who we are. I speak strongly that we need to change this.
Does this also apply for new builds?
Correct.
Any further discussion?
How is this going to impact the two items we took off the consent agenda?
as that contractor was informed previously, any work completed prior to February 1st, that's where it ties into the ordinance. The ordinance wouldn't become effective until February 1st of 2023. So any work completed prior to that will still fall under the current plan of 100%.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, Travis. We still have a different incentive structure for multifamily housing. Is that accurate?
Correct, because those can be viewed as commercial enterprises. And so as long as they are more than 3, is that right, John? I think it's
2 or more.
more than 3 or 3 or more. It's one of the two. But if they are more than 3 or 3 or more, then they can be viewed as commercial engagements and can be received a higher benefit.
Is that negotiated case by case? I mean, with Echo, I know that wasn't 75,000 in taxable incentive per unit.
Right, and theirs is actually limited to 40,000 per. That is a separate negotiated section in the housing revite plan.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have parity and we're not incentivizing one kind of housing at the expense of another or whatever. So, do you feel as if we could take a closer look at our incentive for multifamily housing, or do you think it's appropriate?
I think as far as the motion and second, that discussion maybe would follow after the vote, maybe?
Or another time.
Well, I think he's
Or
trying to
another
figure out
time.
the fairness of it across the spectrum.
Yeah, so if it is, this gets back to the fundamentals behind a revitalization area and a renewal area, where the revite is we want to set the rules that everyone just has.
Oh, you know what? We've heard you do that a lot, and I'm going to stop you because I'm thinking on the mayor's point, this might just be another conversation
Yeah.
in your office, and if I decide to get something on the agenda, I can do that. Sorry, Mayor.
I appreciate that.
Just a point of clarif,
Before I lose my train of thought, if I could just finish quickly though, Echo Development plays into that. An amendment was done after negotiating what Echo wanted as an incentive. That should have probably been an urban renewal plan and rebate back to the developer as opposed to abatement.
just a point of clarification, what did you say the effective date of that would be then?
February 1st.
February 1st, okay.
Okay. Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Jizzle, Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution approving unbudgeted transfer of funds from lost fund to Oneota Bridge. Carrie, I think, is going to be providing information for that.
Yes, so what this is, Jeremy and I have been working with the budget, looking at where the funds are and everything. The Oneota Bridge project is complete. We do have a negative balance of $813,967. One piece of that is one of the payments went into the local option sales tax account. So we need part of that is transferring money to cover that. And then the other piece of that is what would have been Decorah's portion of that project, the 20% of construction, then all the other ineligible expenses. So that's where that resolution comes, to transfer that money from lost into Oneota, and so we can close that account line.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of the funds from lost fund to the Oneota Bridge Fund.
Second.
Motion made by Neal, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion?
Is this, I know that maybe this, I guess I'm just going to ask a question. Is this money that when we were making our plans for spending money on roads last year or this year, was that reflected anywhere in the streets improvement plan that was presented to council or in the budget for the council?
No, it wouldn't have been. Jeremy and I have been working on this. This is kind of done before us, and so we're just getting a handle on it.
That's fine. And I don't mind like getting the books kind of back in order, given we've already committed to the expenditure. But I'd hate to see this set a precedent. I didn't mean to bring up that word again, but I'd hate to see us set a precedent of kind of adding to the amount we're spending without being clear about it, by just creating a negative balance, and then a year and a half later, oh, we better take money and write it. So
I
does
think,
that, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Thank you,
didn't-
Jerry.
I think kind of what has happened in the past, and which isn't necessarily wrong, is when they're doing a project like Oneota Bridge, they're taking all the expenses and they're associating it with that account number. And then when the project gets done, this isn't uncommon to transfer funds to write an account. But you want the account numbers to reflect that they're all coming out of the Oneota Bridge. And then Jeremy and I were just working on this so he can get a better understanding of where he's at, because he's working on the street plan for next year. Yep.
Yeah, in some ways, I like that budgeting better, because otherwise you'd put money in that you might not need and then have to transfer it out. So it does make sense to keep it where it's allocated and then use the money that we thought.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call?
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Motion carried. Consider resolution approving unbudgeted transfer of funds from a, wait a minute. Yeah, I did that right. Consider resolution approving unbudgeted transfer of funds from electric franchise fee fund to street electric franchise fund.
I have had requests from council and then also from Jeremy, when the franchisee alliance franchise fee comes in, before we were putting it all under sustainability.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of hard to tell who had what piece of it. And so what we're doing is we will be creating the street electric franchise fee. And so when the franchise fee comes in, it's gonna be split into two. 50% will go into the street electric franchise fund, and then 50% will be going into sustainability. So when you'll be able to see kind of a little bit more clear of who has what amount. And then, so as of right now, because since we haven't put them both into sustainability, to write that to get street department's portion into that new fund, we will need to transfer the $245,128.68 out of sustainability into this new fund.
Luce would move the resolution to approve transferring unbudgeted funds from electric franchise into the street electric franchise fund.
That 245, what quarters does that apply to?
That is from when we started getting it from April 2021.
Okay.
And then as of right now, that will be in sustainability, $162,335.
And so the street department has never spent any of that electric franchise fee fund?
Wait a second.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, motion made by Luce, seconded by Zittergruen. Any further discussion?
The breakdown, the 50-50 split, that was what the council agreed on as they were in the, is that right? Okay, and then the forester salary comes out of which side of that 50-50 split?
Sustainability.
Okay, all right. And then is the street portion of it intended to be used for any particular usage or just to address how we always wish we had more money for streets?
My understanding is that it would be street specific. Sorry.
It was,
Because it's meant to backfill the portion that was lost, because you can't charge a franchise fee plus sales tax.
I see, thank you.
Okay, roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal,
aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution setting pay ranges for non-union personnel. Travis?
Yeah, so based upon previous discussions with council, including most recently the work session on the 24th, where several comparable cities were provided, the ranges were provided. The ranges proposed, again, at that session mirror the ones that you'll find in Dropbox as the attachment for proposed ranges. Those would put us in what I would call average. It doesn't necessarily push us even on the far end of high end of the spectrum. The only position, I did misspeak at the work session, there is one position of the 29 that this impacts that will see an immediate increase because their current pay is below the proposed new minimum, and that is the deputy city clerk position, which would receive the new minimum if approved, which is an increase of about $700 for the year. The adjustments for potential indirect costs, we'll call it. So the adjustment will allow a few long-term employees that are currently capped at the current maximums to be eligible for the performance-based pay increase of 2% as provided in the pay plan. That amounts to roughly $8,800.
I make a motion to set the new pay ranges for non-union personnel through resolution.
Luce is second.
Motion made by Neal, seconded by Luce. Any further discussion?
Just for clarity, so this only raises our current budget by $700, and then in the next years, $8,000 because we're just dealing with people hitting up their maximum pay rates, right?
Correct. The direct impact of this action is $700 for that new minimum position. And then for any other indirect cost for wages is $8,800 because there are a few that their new maximum will allow for the potential 2% performance pay increase.
Right. So just for clarity, on articles that were written previously, this is not a $180,000 budget impact.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call.
Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider an ordinance amending ordinance number 1228, designating an area of Decorah, Iowa as the 2014 Decorah Housing Urban Revitalization Area. First reading. Travis?
Yep, so this ties back to the tax abatement, housing revite discussion we had before with the public hearing and the resolution. Again, this ordinance, final step, what this does is create a new taxing district, if you will, that the auditor's office will use. And the ordinance won't become effective until February 1st to allow for those currently under construction to be able to finish up their projects and be eligible for the old.
I have a question. In the ordinance, it designates it as the Calmer Urban Revitalization Area. Is that, is there a reason for that, or is it just that they copy and pasted wrong and then charge us a lot of money anyway?
Should be the latter of the two.
Okay. John, should we amend it? Amend it. Okay, I move, and I'm going to make sure Calmer isn't anywhere else real quick. Thanks.
No Kalmar Street or anything.
All right, I move to, have we moved and seconded the ordinance yet?
No.
No, nothing.
Okay, can I make it all in one motion then? Yeah. So I move we accept the ordinance with the exception that we strike Calmer in section 1 and replace it with Decorah. John, could you check my work?
Second.
Motion made by Zittergruen, seconded by Olson. Further discussion?
Is it the whole city?
Correct, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did make that change, if you remember, at the public hearing to incorporate all city limits.
I thought maybe it was our plat.
Okay.
That's why I clarified. I really didn't know for sure.
I thought, I'm like, well, they have weird plat names.
Okay, roll call.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider an ordinance amending Chapter 17.96 C3 Central Business Commercial District related to principal permitted uses. First reading.
Okay, this is a second attempt at the first reading. The public hearing was held at the October 17th meeting, and at that meeting there was discussion about the clarifying the language that was inserted of Water Street elevation regarding parking garages under the other principal permitted uses. The ordinance in front of you tonight for consideration has changed all references of Water Street to the addressed street so that the requirements therein will apply to the fronts of all buildings in the C3 district, regardless of whether on Water Street or not. Discussion was had on other potential changes to the ordinance, but were not added at this time. If there are other, if there are other uses that council wishes to add or delete before this reading, a new public hearing would be required. So if there are other specific uses that you don't want to get into, last time there was a lot of overlay discussion and potential new zoning discussion. Aside from that, this would be a good time that if there were any, if you could think of any currently principal permitted uses downtown that aren't listed here, we still should get those added and set a new hearing. So if you could think of any uses downtown that aren't listed here that you want to add.
Not that we want to take away.
If you want to take away, again,
But this is for the entire C3 district.
entire C3 district, correct.
I had a question about the garage. So if Fairway wanted to put a parking garage in their parking lot, let's say they, whatever reason, they wanted to build up, where could the entrance be?
I love hypotheticals.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just thinking. I mean, I was as I was driving down here. I'm like, I really don't like this ordinance in the first place. But I find, I think that the problem comes for me is that we're trying to negotiate something on a limited area and applying it on a broad area, right? I mean, the reason we're doing this ordinance is for Water Street in our historic district, and I feel like we're taking the entire C3 district, which includes areas like Fairway, which I think makes it confusing when we change it to the addressed street as opposed to water.
They could apply for a variance, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the premise behind a variance is that the strict, it's literally in our code on variance, is a strict interpretation of the code as it exists, creates an undue hardship on the property owner. So whereas Fairway would,
Not have any.
has an East Main address. So as it's proposed, the entrance could not be on East Main. It would have to be on Broadway or. Thank you.
Well, so, and I understand the variance process, but I also hear in my head, I forget what council member chirps at me about how if we're giving variances, that means our code is not written correctly, right? That we shouldn't be giving variances all the time to do things, that we should be writing code accordingly.
The person at the Iowa State Extension Office who came and presented to us about that question said that a city the size of Decorah should maybe be giving 2 or 3 variances a year for particularly hard cases. It seems like the hypothetical you're raising might meet that kind of level. But let me also point out that in your hypothetical, this code doesn't apply at all because this code only applies to parking garages built under other existing uses. So unless Fairway wanted to have a parking garage under their store, this code would apply. But they could just build a parking garage in their parking lot under our current code and have the entrance wherever they want because our code doesn't, well, wherever we allow them via site plan review, because our code doesn't spell out rules for that.
So you could tear down a building and put a parking garage and have the entrance on Water Street?
Always could.
Provided our site plan review
For some reason,
process
I thought
allows it.
This was actually preventing that.
No, this is only in conjunction with another permitted principal use above.
So if they wanted to essentially put a parking garage there and put housing on top of it, then the only entrance could be either Broadway or the other side of the street. Which actually isn't a
Or the
bad
two
idea
side
if they wanted to
streets,
do
yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm sympathetic to like some of the concerns that you raised with your hypothetical about Water Street, and I think that we should maybe address that with a further process, but I feel like this is good code.
Okay, this is the first reading.
So are there any other uses within the C3 that maybe got missed? This has been through P&Z and council, but is there anything downtown that you think of that currently exists that you want to make sure stays in there?
That's the fourth time you've asked, Travis.
Yeah,
I know, I'm just curious.
gonna
Is there
say.
something that you're thinking of? Because I would welcome any staff guidance on that question. Is there something in particular that you're concerned we're missing?
So there is one, and I've been debating on whether, we've been made aware of at least one, possibly two, with residential use on the main level. Is that something council wants to consider or not?
Would that require adding that? Would that require going back to public hearing?
It would be a new public hearing.
So what about residential use, but not with an entrance on water? Or it can't, can we do something where it's like no more than a certain percentage of the building?
You can. There are some communities that have that in their code. Actually, it aligns somewhat like at the proposed parking garage, how it says the garage structure itself on the address street elevation can only be on the rear 50% of the building.
Can we, I want to see the whole C3 district area. So I'm just imagining.
Why would that be something that would be added into the discussion that we talked about?
Correct,
To
yes.
come before? I mean, this would go through, but there's that other discussion that would be coming, this could be added to that?
It can be.
Okay.
It can be.
So
Currently, we allow housing on street level,
No, we don't.
so why are these there?
how many?
That's why I'm making council aware that is this something we want to allow or not.
So
I guess
what if
I'd
a
be-
person wanted to live in the back of their store?
Because are you talking about housing on anywhere on the main floor?
That's up for council's discussion.
Okay.
But
I guess I'd be reluctant to go down that road. I just don't think we want to interfere with the fact of keeping retail stores on that main level. So I would not be in favor of it.
Again, that's the problem, I think, with looking at Water Street and Historic District and the rest of the C3 district, right? Because there are exceptions where I think I could see you have your store and you have your shop. In fact, in strong towns, that is a very common thought, right? Because as you build, you want to be able to have people start small, which kind of means like I live where I work, and allows for that opportunity of people who don't have a lot of capital to start investing. So to take our whole C3 district and say that we're open to that as long as a certain percentage has to be retail space, I'm open to that thought, actually. I'm not but then again, I still really want to see that Water Street overlay or the historic district to separate out that place. But as I think about our whole C3 district, I think that there could be a good use of I'm going to live in part of my space and have retail in front of where I work.
I think this is opening up a big can of worms, and again, I feel like if we're going to tackle the housing, retail space on a limited basis, back a shop must be owner occupied. I mean, those are the kinds of rules that I would want, but I feel like we would need to research that, maybe see what other communities are doing before we attempt to write this on the fly tonight. So again, I think this is an improvement to the code, and I'd like to pass it. And Emily, I'm ready to march into Travis's office with you and talk about, a more intense zoning district along Water Street.
Why are we in such a hurry to pass this one?
Well, because I'll be honest with you, I'm getting a little heat on why we're not enforcing that. That we've been made
enforcing
aware.
that particular one.
Are you,
Why we're not enforcing, we've been made aware, and why we're not enforcing.
Is there
was
only
your
one?
question, Emily?
There's one that we know of, possibly two.
Emily, was your question in relation to the
This ordinance.
apartment or the whole ordinance?
My question was in relation to the whole ordinance,
That's
because
what I
I
thought.
keep feeling like every time I have a question about this ordinance, I'm getting like, stop questioning this ordinance, pass this one now, and we'll deal with everything
Yeah,
else later.
that's
I'm just trying to
exactly
figure
what
out
the-
why.
That's exactly what the discussion has been in the past. So,
I mean, unless you have like specific amendments or arguments against this ordinance, I think, I'm not telling you to not try to change it or make it better. I think that this is an improvement to city code, and I think that's why I'm in favor of it. I also want to see many of the things that you want to see addressed. We're maybe just dithering over the right mechanism for it.
Do you,
I'd move the
well,
first reading for acceptance.
can I ask one quick question for you before I?
but he just made a motion.
Oh, well, I can still discuss. Okay, so Steve,
And
are-
wait, I got a motion in a second, and I just want to make sure I say it. And then discussion.
okay, sorry.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Chisel. Discussion.
Okay, so Steve, are you saying you are open to the idea of a percentage of retail space with a living quarter in back for the C3 district?
I think the first thing to do that seems obvious to me is to differentiate between, I guess, the thickest part of the C3 district, the historical commercial center, and the rest. And I don't think the rules for one should be the same as the rules for the other. And I'm frankly scared to speculate on the question of a few non-conforming housing units in the C3 district, because I'd hate to see how that got characterized in the media. I'd rather research the issue and learn more and come
Yeah.
up with a specific proposal than sit here and give fuel to a headline like council now wants to turn all of the C3 into housing, which obviously wouldn't be accurate whatsoever. But I feel like there's a much better way to have this conversation.
And consequently, then I'd encourage the discussion to come
At a different
rapidly
time.
at another time.
So then if we decide to amend the C3 eventually to include this, if we decide we want to go that direction,
Right.
is that what you would
Then
suggest?
Yeah, and a lion's share of this, bringing this up tonight, was, I was hoping organically there'd be a discussion on additional uses and gauge the interest of council on that side, so we could work towards, if there was interest of council, having that component. This at least gives me a little bit of direction on, how do I put this? Now that knowing there's possible discussions and stuff, I'm not knocking in anyone's door and throwing them out.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second.
And with that, are you okay then if we pass this with the idea that we are going to further discuss what that could look like?
Yes, but
Yes.
Okay.
hopefully with a little bit of speed as
Can
well.
you,
Yes.
are there other examples of that where people are, I mean, I think about like places where I've been to cities where they live in the back of the dry cleaner, or they, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just curious about what that looks like.
Yeah, there are several.
Okay.
Can I
Humble
ask-
had one.
Can I ask about the staircases from Water Street? Are the staircases considered part of the residential use, or are they simply, I mean, do you know what I mean? Are they not residential? Because they're on the ground floor, kind of, or half of them are.
But we allow dwellings above the primary
allow a way to
permitted
get there,
use,
yeah.
and you got to have a way to get up there.
Right.
So, yeah, it's not that's not the living space.
Okay, so we have a motion and second. We've had discussion. Roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Chisel, Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
No.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergrun.
Motion carried with research to be happening
Can-
shortly after this.
Yeah, can I give some direction? And I guess I would like to see two things happening pretty quickly. One is I am interested in what percentage of livable space, and then how do we keep that retail space active? So a person can't just like have a space they don't rent out and then they're living on the first floor, right? So what is our ability to enforce that it's actually, so the retail space has to be active and open, or somehow, so it's not just I'm living and then I have a window out there. And then I really want to see quick turnaround on creating a new district in our historic district downtown, because then I do want to change principal uses. in creating an overlay. Is that what we would call it, an overlay?
Well, it depends. There's two paths. Overlay is better to add restrictions, but if you're talking you want to remove uses, that might actually be better to do a completely different zoning district.
Then I think it's the completely different zoning district.
Those are definitely two things that we need to be discussed in the future.
And you want to do that before any kind of rural housing assessment or anything like that, right? You want to have the overlay discussion fast?
Okay. Okay, consider approval of Decorah Police Department sign on bonus agreement.
Okay, so previously the city, when having an open police officer position, has advertised a $5,000 sign-on bonus, but we don't have, and it's never been utilized. No certified officer has been hired and received said sign-on bonus. The concept behind this is hiring a police officer, sending him to the academy, 16 weeks long, you're paying wages, you're paying room and board, you're paying the academy, you're looking at about $20,000. And so to hopefully be able to recruit a certified police officer that, I don't want to call them plug and play, but there is field training officer work and stuff done locally, but you're not losing them for 16 weeks to the academy. That's the premise behind offering some kind of sign-on bonus for a certified peace officer. But we don't have a written policy behind when those payments are made, or even that this exists. So the sign-on bonus agreement that's provided for council consideration will be used very much like, if council remembers, the employment contract for police officers. It says if you're not certified and we send you to the academy, you have a 5-year repayment schedule that if you leave, it's prorated, but if you leave within 5 years, you're going to pay us back for those costs. This agreement, similar to that, it's just a template. So council would approve said template that staff can then utilize to execute. The way it's proposed is $5,000 total, paid out half at 6 months and the other half at 1 year of employment. We'll note this was discussed briefly at the Civil Service Commission meeting the other day, and there was support behind that.
What's the current cost of sending somebody through the academy right now?
Roughly 20, probably closer to 25.
By meals and everything like that.
I guess there's no incentive here to hiring people and having them stay. I guess I would rather see a larger incentive and then also a 5-year payback, a 5-year agreement. At the end of 5 years, if they haven't stayed, they have to pay it back. And I don't know if that's a $10,000 incentive or.
Oh, okay.
I'm with Kirk on that too. I think we need to
Giving someone $5,000 in the first year is great, but they don't have to pay it back if they leave after a year. And we have a retention problem in our PD. So I guess I would be more in favor of entertaining a larger incentive, but it has to be paid back, and it can be. I don't know if it should be even prorated. I'm not so sure it shouldn't be a 5-year. You get $10,000, you got to stay 5 years. But any thoughts?
Do we have issues? I think it's maybe a smarter incentive structure, but do we have issues when officers do choose to leave before the 5-year or whatever window is up? Do we have any issues collecting?
I would say we've been pretty fortunate.
Because that seems to me to be one of the possible shortcomings of, they tell us to pound sand, I'm pretty judgment proof, or, whatever. I'm not going to answer your letters. Okay. I think that if the alternative is sending someone through academy for $30K plus versus a generous incentive structure, but that we can claw back if we don't get a decent commitment of years, I think that would be smart money. Maybe we should do a little bit of both, maybe $5K just for signing on as a certified officer, and then maybe another 5K that we claw back if you don't stay 5 years, something like that.
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Well, I was just saying that what if we just
He's
added
saying
an
do-
additional?
He's saying do 5,000, just like this says, you know, paid off in the first year, it's 6 months in a year, and then another 5 up to, so 10,000. But that second 5, they get it at in those 2 lump sum payments. But if they don't stay another 5 years, they pay 5,000 back. Correct? Is that what you're saying, Steve?
Yeah, and again, that's $20,000 cheaper than it is to send someone through the academy, and we, for me, that seems to me to be smart money. But if I'm missing something, like,
Go ahead.
Chief, what do you think about that? I mean, do you see any shortcomings in that type of idea or incentives that would make that better?
Yeah, a couple of points. First of all, when we started this incentive of $5,000, that was about 2 years ago, and I came to Travis with a couple of cities that were all moving in this direction, and $5,000 was kind of a middle of the road, especially for cities our size. There's huge sign-on bonuses right now. There's $10,000, $20,000. It keeps going up because everybody's hiring. It's not just Decorah Police Department that has retention issues. If you go on Facebook on a law enforcement site, you'll see all the people listing jobs right now they're hiring. We're seeing things we've never seen before. The Iowa State Patrol is advertising. They've never advertised ever. It's like the post office. They've never advertised. Now they're advertising. People need bodies. We talked about, I'm glad you brought that up, Kirk. We've talked about raising that incentive up. We wasn't sure what the response was going to be from Civil Service Commission or from the council, or where's that money coming from. We did have a talk this morning, the assistant chief and I, about a program, even with the $5,000 bonus, of how can we retain somebody so they're not coming here for the sign-on bonus and leaving right away.
Right.
Just so you know, that's not a trend. I've spoken to police chiefs across the state of Iowa about what we can do to improve our numbers on hiring on application day. They're not seeing people going and picking up checks and then leaving, going to the next department, picking up checks. That's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is kind of the bad eggs from departments getting out of their department and going to other agencies, and then you end up with somebody that you don't want. So what we're doing is due diligence in the background checks. We've had nobody jump at the $5,000 the last 2 times we've thrown it out there. So I don't expect $5,000 to do much for us this time. $10,000 does certainly raise the stakes. I'm all in favor of a staggering, giving them the money, but then having a contract, John, like we do for new hires. If we're going to send you to the academy, we're going to invest a lot of money in you. We want that back if you're going to leave. I think the same thing with this. If we put $10,000 on the board, let's have a 5-year payback program if they don't stick around.
And Chief, would it be a recommendation that if you stay 1 year and then you leave, you pay back $8K? Like, do we take it down proportionally? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it would be.
Okay.
There's
Right.
the program that we have set up right now for people we put through the academy is a 5-year contract that they sign, and it's progressive over a couple of years as far as what they pay. If they stay 1 year, they owe X amount. They stay 2 years, they owe X, 3, and it just kind of works its way down smaller and smaller, diminishes what they owe us. And I think this would be the same way.
Something to maybe consider would be a 25 sign on, 25 at 6 months, 5,000 at a year, because as Chief pointed out, you kind of, yes, background checks, we make sure to put a lot of emphasis in there, try and wash out the bad eggs, but this still gives you time that, hey, during that first 6 months, if it's not playing out, the city's out $2,500 on the sign out bonus for somebody that just didn't work out. Same on if it takes us longer, that, hey, there's a chance, we're out 5,000. Now we get to year 10, because if we terminate,
You mean year 5?
or excuse me, just after year 1, under 25-25-5, if it's, now after year 1 and we terminate after they've received 10,000 in sign-on bonus, we're out.
I think that based on what the chief said about the fact that 5K isn't getting bites, and that if we do get a bite with 10K, it saves us $20,000 right away. And given sort of Travis's wisdom, I think you can still advertise the structure you propose as $10,000 in bonuses in your first year of employment. That's kind of what you would get done.
Right.
I would like to see this matter tabled, and I'd like to direct staff to come back with a structure that reflects the consensus of the discussion this evening.
I would second that as well. Let's table this and make sure we get it right this time.
Do we have to vote on tabling it, or do you just,
If it's a formal motion and second, then yes, but if
Okay.
I'm just taking direction and work with
Okay.
John and Dave, we can draft something, just bring it next time.
okay?
Yeah, I
Doesn't
just
have
said I
be a
would like to
formal
see this
vote.
tabled.
So
so-
just
So
go
just
that
for my own clarity, I got lost in the numbers. So we're proposing an initial large fee that someone, or large sign-on bonus someone would get, but if they don't stay 5 years, they wind up paying it back.
Correct,
Yeah,
so-
Okay.
however long they've stayed,
Yeah, and it's prorated per. Okay.
prorated.
That's the word I was trying to come up with.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say a year and a half into it before the second.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll construct it in a way that the council can debate and move, 12 months or 18 months.
Great.
Okay, very
Thanks,
good.
Chief, for your input.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Kurt, for the suggestion.
Welcome.
Consider approval of mayor appointment for planning and zoning applicant. We were fortunate this time to have 5 good applicants. When I look at the positions that we currently have, we've got 2 that are construction, 2 that are businesses, 2 individuals, 3 men, 3 women. So some of the criteria I looked at, I reflected from that, but my recommendation for moving forward would be Megan Buckingham. And the reason I state that is because of her work history, and actually her experience in organization skills, her grant experience and leadership skills. She had worked in Minnesota on land stewardship program, which dealt with working with policies and ordinance for rural and farmers. She also worked for RC&D for the watershed projects for Upper Iowa and Wapsipinicon. She helped with planning, and there again, she was working with grant experience. She's been congregational president of the church she attends. She currently is working with fundraising, which requires, once again, organizational qualifications. She's a good facilitator and coordinator of various community initiatives. And so my recommendation for filling the P&Z is Megan Buckingham.
I'll make a motion to support the mayor's recommendation for Megan Buckingham for planning and zoning.
Second.
Motion made by Neal, seconded by Olson. Any discussion?
Just to say that I was really pleased with the depth of the applicant pool, and it was nice to see so many fine candidates who put themselves forward, and I hope that we see their names come up again. This was just great surfeit of riches.
Well, and it was neat to be able to have potential for even some of the other initiatives that we're working on to pull some of those in.
I just want to second what Steve said, and please don't let it deter you from putting in again down the road just because you weren't selected this time, because this was an excellent group of people we saw come forward.
Roll call?
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel,
No.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried. We're going to move the city manager and department head reports up as we're going to be going into closed session. I know there was some pretty good pieces of news that we wanted to get across and didn't want to come back out, and nobody here to hear it.
All right. So I'll pass and let everyone else say the good news.
Oh, Des, let's make sure you've got that microphone on.
All right. For the last year and a half or so, we've been working with Homeland Security and FEMA on some mitigation or hazard mitigation grant. Last week, we were awarded that grant for funding in the amount of about $220,000 for emergency standby generators. for
Woohoo.
6 locations. And if you can remember, those are the 6 locations that we budgeted for.
Yep.
Well, there's still details we got to work out, and there's still some information coming our way. But the $220,000 go a long ways towards that, completing that project. It'll make a big improvement on the water budget.
That's fantastic. We have to give some credit to Sean Snyder for bringing that forth.
Yeah, there was a lot of
And
people
then
involved in this.
Yourself and Jeremy and
Yep, Sean Snyder started
Chopper.
the whole thing.
Right.
And it actually went back to Tom Rhodes when he was
okay.
assistant city engineer. He was a big part of it. Jeremy Bro was a big part of it. Jess Kennan got in on the last bit of it, and then a little bit of legwork from the water department. So yeah, we're really excited about that.
Well, that doesn't come along very often, and it's really kudos for the city to be able to get that.
That's great news. Thank you
Yep.
so much.
And the project, there, like I say, there's still details worked out. Has to be completed by the end of 23, I believe, 24.
Might even be 5.
It might be
Depending on the-
in 25. Okay. So, but we have
Outstanding,
time.
guys, good work.
Any other department head? Travis, did you have anything? Carrie?
Come on. Good news.
Okay, yes, sorry. It was in the update, but yes, we started taking credit cards. That's a big deal. We
That's a
listed
big deal.
taking online credit card payments. So, and our general ledger is officially electronic, so we're slowly moving forward.
Good.
Who's more excited, Travis or Karen?
I was last week, he was this week. Last week I was excited.
Well, it's good to have good news coming forth. Anything else? Okay, I'd like to close this session and,
Wait, we don't
okay,
want to do
go
council
ahead.
reports?
Oh, sorry.
I just assumed,
Yeah, all right. Council reports, let's go around. Randy,
I have nothing this evening, Mayor.
go ahead.
okay, one, tomorrow's election day, so get out and exercise your right to democracy. So hopefully everyone will go out and vote tomorrow. And then also I want to say that of all the things we've done today, I'm really happy we passed the salary schedule. I've been wanting to say this, that honestly, in my time on city council, the thing I'm most impressed with is our staff and how dedicated they are, how thorough they are. And I feel like this has been a long time coming in terms of recognizing that you guys work really hard. And I just really, I think it was great work, and you guys were very patient. So I want to say thank you and go from there. But the staff is amazing.
Okay. Kirsten?
I just wanted to reiterate what Emily had said about voting. It's, as a veteran, it's frustrating to see only 55, 60% of our people show up to vote at any election. A lot of veterans have given time, sweat, honor. Many have given their lives. Please exercise that right tomorrow if you haven't done so already, and get out and vote.
Steve Luce,
Yes, here.
would you like to say more than just that you're present? I have heard comments.
I am a
so
present to all of you, I'm sure.
I haven't noticed that you've been accounted for over here.
Concern about the visual problem generated by the lighting on the Veterans Memorial. That it's a very bright and intense when one comes up Water Street. And I don't know if there's any way to shield any of that so it's not glaring in people's eyes as they drive by.
I believe it's on a timer. Like 10 or something.
No, I'm talking whenever you drive by, it's not directed at all. It's just capped and it shines straight into your driver's eyes. So I think that's a bit of a safety concern.
And maybe we could take a look at that. Or Travis.
Yeah, I don't think, the intent isn't to leave all the lights on in the Veterans Memorial on any given day, special events, maybe certain things come along. But the only light that'll be on there in the evening is the one light on the flagpole, which faces down.
I hear you.
So they've been off for since about middle of last week. They got it all hooked up and finished. That isn't the intent.
Okay,
And I think help,
And besides not being on all the time, there is covers for all those light posts that didn't come in. So right now, there's like
Ah.
That's probably what it is.
360 degrees.
yeah,
When those covers come, it'll only be pointed.
directed at the, gotcha. Good, good to
I-
hear that.
thanks for noting then.
I may have missed it. Is there an event there Friday? Or on Veterans? Has there been an
Not
event?
there,
Okay.
not yet.
I think the Helping Services fundraising is coming in the walkthrough on Wednesday, is that right?
I think,
No, Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Right.
So invite everyone to participate in that and support Helping Services in their fundraising.
And if you got free time during the day, check with Jack and Tim. They're looking for help setting up displays and pulling cords, and,
so they're still working at getting it all set up?
well, they missed 2 days last week.
Oh, sure. Who's doing that?
Uh,
Oh, I know, Jack Barloon.
and Tim Mueller.
Okay, gotcha.
He's done with Boston Crane, he's out there working.
Okay. Anything else?
The SMID group has stopped meeting because they don't usually have any business over this time, any bills to pay or whatever, so they're in suspension until March, I believe, or the next, in case a bill comes in, they would call a meeting, but that's been suspended. The plants did really well this year, although we had trouble with equipment for watering and keeping them running and the pumps going and not getting backed over and breaking them, so. Just what happened the last meeting with that. Wish everyone much giving of thanks for the many blessings we have in this community and country. And part of that is tomorrow's activity. If you haven't yet, please do vote
Thank you. Steve Zetagrun?
appropriately.
It's a qualifier, which I probably won't accept in this setting, so.
The,
I-
the chamber sent out a nice email this afternoon just detailing all of their holiday plans, and I direct your attention to it, that the lighted Christmas parade is going to be lit. There's lots of other support local business stuff there, and I hope the whole community, takes seriously that if we, want to, we're blessed to have an extraordinary downtown shopping area and retail district, and supporting it with your dollars in the holiday season is one of the best gifts you can give yourself.
Okay. Kurt?
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay. I did attend the ATV event that was out at the fair, which was kind of surprising to me. I think they had over 130 that joined. I think they raised $12,000 for, boy, I'm really sorry. I can't tell you for sure what it was for once. But it was for nonprofits and with, pardon?
Some went to the Fair Board.
Fair Board, and then, who was the other one? Elks, that's correct. But those were people that many people came from out of town, so it brought in a lot of commercial business by either staying in the hotels or whatever, but it was quite the sight to see. I enjoyed seeing it. With nothing else, we will,
have a meeting with the senior hospitality,
okay?
talking about their desires, and they're very much interested in maintaining the ownership and control of the facility, but we're still looking at ways that the city might interact and support.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 22, we are going to move to closed session for Bank of the West leased. Motion made by Chisel to go back into open session.
Second.
Seconded by Olson. Roll call. Is everybody here?
Chisel. Olson. Neal.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Okay, Discussion is on possible action for the Bank of the West lease.
I would move for approval of the lease as discussed.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Johnson, to accept the lease as discussed. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Well, I
Oh,
just,
sorry. Sorry.
should we get background on it now that we're doing this in public, or
Not until a positive vote.
okay, all
'Cause
right, that makes
If it were
sense,
to be a
thank you.
negative vote, then
Okay. Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
No.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
No.
Sittergren.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, do we just have it adjourned? What
Correct.
else?
I would
Move to adjourn.
adjourn.
Okay, sounds good.